So Pedro is an artist born and based in Mexico City. His work follows a double path: art as aesthetic research and art as social practice. Over the course of his career, he's developed and designed projects proposing playful and creative solutions to social problems through a variety of expression ranging from sculpture, installation, performance, puppet productions, video, regardless of the medium you choose, Pedro. Your work is consistently guided by basic principles of equality, compassion, and sharing. His work often includes an open invitation for community engagement, and it integrates elements of theater, psychology, and activism. Pedro's exhibition, Direct Action, is on view in our museum here, and it's up until May 8th, so if you haven't seen it yet, there'll be an opportunity to see it after this talk. Our next guest, Miranda Viscoli, is the co-founder and co-president of New Mexicans to Prevent Gun Violence, whose sole purpose is the prevention of gun violence in New Mexico. Miranda works with schools, school boards, police departments, legislators, city council, the New Mexico Department of Health, all of these groups together to implement gun violence prevention measures throughout the state. She's created and implemented an art-based gun violence program in schools throughout New Mexico and has helped design and organize a national gun buyback program called Guns to Gardens. Guns to Gardens adapts buyback models that uses disabled gun parts for community healing and art projects. So those projects range from making garden tools and other items like flower vases, which she, alongside Pedro, and a local artist and welder named Jeremy Thomas, students from Robert F. Kennedy Charter School and IAIA came together for this exhibition to put together a project which you can see on view in our lobby. Miranda and Pedro, thank you both so much for being here. So before we begin our conversation today, I want to recognize the recent impact of gun violence on our community in New Mexico. Last weekend, 2 students from Robert F. Kennedy Charter School were shot and killed. They were brothers, Gabriel and Matthew Cruz. This recent tragedy weighs on our hearts today, and it's in their memory and the memory of countless others that we hope to honor here today in our attempt to imagine a world where weapons of destruction could be transformed into catalysts for healing. The vases made by the students here in the front seats, thank you guys, they're amazing. The vases are on sale. They're in the front lobby, and 100% of the proceeds from the sales go back to New Mexicans to Prevent Gun Violence in support of future buyback programs. So have a look. There's a QR code there if you want to be involved, if you want to support this. You can take direct action right after this in our lobby. Our staff has put together a really thoughtful community resource pamphlet, which you might have on your seat, or it might have been given to you when you checked in, but if not, they're definitely available at the back. And they're there to guide you if you want to get involved or if you need support. So check those out after, or I hope you all got one. Now our conversation. Pedro, thank you. Thank you for sharing your work with us here. I want to kick the conversation off talking about Palas por Pistolas. Can you tell us about this project, which is on view in the museum? So if you haven't seen it yet, this is a great introduction. Tell us about this project and maybe tell us a little bit about who and what inspired this work.
Thank you very much for, like the fantastic experience that has been putting this show together with you, Brandee. I am ever grateful for the fantastic times that and new work actually that came out of this the concept of direct action, and thank you all, everyone today for joining us. Palas por Pistolas, I think that it's like a piece that has like a triple genealogy in because there were like important, like I don't think that one has like never like kind of a fully new ideas. It's more like you put together elements that already exist out there. And one of my mentors and teachers, Antanas Mocus, the former mayor of Bogota, was trying to bring down gun violence in his city, and when he was a mayor, and he came up with a campaign to collect weapons, where these weapons were melted and made into spoons, which so it was like a kind of a interesting also approach of turning like an agent of death into an agent of life. These spoons were given to kind of a children hospitals and children schools that and they had like a legend that says like fui arma, no, I was a weapon. So it was like a kind of a concept of the transformation of this metal, which is a sort of alchemical transformation, no, because there's a kind of a principle in alchemy that is solve et coagula, not to dissolve and coagulate. So I think that sculpture is very much often that process of changing the shape of matter. Um, so that was a kind of a very inspiring reference for me. Obviously, one can think of Joseph Beuys with his 7,000 oaks, this kind of massive sculpture that involved planting 7,000 trees. Um, and another reference, I think it was Alexandros Jodorowsky technique of psychomagia, where he has like these rituals that are often traumatic, in the sense that, like a Jodorowsky's technique of healing oftentimes involves you facing that thing that you're afraid of, um, and but in a kind of almost theatrical context. But the what, but I was curious that a lot of the time when he does a prescription for a therapy for this kind of form of therapy that is based on rituals, there was like a planting at the end of a plant or flower or something. So I asked him, why do you ask people to plant something? And he told me, because like a foreclosure is not enough to close a cycle, but you have to open a new one. And so it's like, you have like this alpha and omega. So if you have the omega, which is the end, you have to have an alpha. So it's like a kind of important thing that so I took these kind of elements together. I think that it's almost like a kind of esoteric idea, because, for instance, the alchemists were interested in working with what it was they called el nigredo, the dark matter. But and they were trying to turn shit into gold, no? So I think that it is very curious, because there's this term called eschatology. So eschatological is something that at the same time may be used to refer to shit and to death. Like eschatology is also like the kind of a story of the afterlife, no? So I asked Jodorowsky, like, why is it that there's like this connection between shit and death? And he told me, well, like there's like this kind of different, if you see in different religions and different traditions, oftentimes there's like this connection. Like the Egyptians depicted like a beetle that was like pushing a dung ball,
Right,
and it's like the sun that is moving across the sky, and the human soul is like a little larva that lives inside the dung ball. and that's, guys, there's a whole idea of, and then that's why the mummies are kind of woven, and like a whole thing that it involves with kind of a how life is found in shit. Like it's like the compost for and also in Buddhism you have the the lotus flower that grows on the sewage. So and then you have the like this idea of the alchemist trying to turn. So there's like I thought for me like that dark part of human nature, or which is guns. Because guns are like the rule of fear and the rule of and also kind of sort of like like a kind of I think that in the end we're apes. We have still the brain architecture of apes, that we think that we need violence in order to survive, and that we are triggered by this kind of violent, the same way that we are kind of excited by sex, we may be excited by violence, and that's why all movies have like the last 30 minutes is like a car chase or a fight, that that there's like this kind of a very very basic idea that we have like these kind of triggers in our brain that respond to violence. And so for me, like this idea of turning a gun into a musical instrument, or turning a gun into a shovel, is like a physical transformation of matter, but also hopefully a psychological transformation, to try to take that dark part of our spirit or nature and find there in that kind of dark matter uh, the, this, the force to overcome trauma and overcome uh, death by turning this material into something else.
Right, turning into life. So since you started the project Palas por Pistolas, how many? There's a tree planting that happens with each exhibition, and in fact, you started with 1,527 guns, which then will turn into the same amount of shovels, which then turned into the same amount of trees that have been planted. But this project's been going for a long time. Like, how many trees do you think that this project has worked with the community to plant since its inception?
The idea of having like this kind of parity was of like for every gun there would be like a tree,
Yeah.
was like an like idea of like accountability, or making something granular, in the sense that uh, I mean, maybe I come from a family of engineers. That's where like for instance, like if you want to kind of prove that there's been change, you have to be able to measure it. So that's something that an artist will not usually like kind of accept, because we work in the symbolic realm. So, but I thought that this was like perhaps an opportunity to try to test where there, like we could like kind of say, well, like these many trees have been planted, and I know that now we have at least met the goal of the 1,500 trees. And probably we're like over 2,000 trees that have been planted in different because there were like kind of several planties that were kind of big, with 500 trees
Yeah.
planted. So 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 the goal was met. The exact number, I'm now
And
trying to kind of
it's
find like
ongoing.
pictures of
Right.
the trees. But the most rewarding thing is to see that the trees that were planted like 7, 8 years ago now are 20 feet tall or 30 feet tall. Like they grow.
Yeah, trees grow. It's amazing, right? Miranda, can you tell us? It's really magical that we're all on stage here today. So much serendipity has occurred to bring us all together here. And can you tell us how you became aware of Pedro's work and how it inspired what you're doing?
Yeah, so and also a huge thank you to Site, and you guys have been such a huge support. And I want to give a big shout out to Judea and Nathan, they spent, like, with this crazy idea that Pedro had, and I'll get to that question. He designed these, good crazy. He designed these vases for. He said, "Can you get youth to weld them?" And the show's starting in a week and a half. And I'm going, "What? Oh, I don't
It's
know
really
if I can
remarkable
do
what has
that."
occurred here in the
And
last.
Judea and Nathan, they took this project on. Like, they literally, the majority of those vases, and then they bring what? They bring 5 more today. I mean, you guys did over 30 vases, so thank you. Thank you. I mean, that is direct action, and we really were touched by the work you did and your passion for it. So thank you, and we look forward to some other crazy stuff we're going to do. And hopefully not that crazy. Anyway, so Pedro didn't even know that he was like this huge hero. Oh, and I also want to thank our board. We have all our board members here, and they do so much work that nobody ever sees. And it's not just me; it is what those guys are doing 24/7. So thank you for your work. So Pedro didn't know that he was this big hero here. Like, he had no idea. And a teacher, Carol from El Camino Real, told him, said, "Hey, did you know Pedro Reyes is going to be in town?" I'm like, "What?" And so I just kind of cold called Brandee, who I'd never met before, and I said,
And I just happened to answer my phone, which I hardly ever have the opportunity to do. It was very magical.
"This is kind of crazy, but Pedro was one of the biggest inspirations for our Guns to Gardens program that we've been doing since 2016. Is there any way we can, like, do something crazy with the gun parts we have with him when he gets here?" And so this whole thing exploded. But it was Pedro's idea, and the idea of Mike from Raw Tools, who really wanted to be here, but he's sick. And it was their idea, and we just took that idea and kind of went with it and grew it. And we grew it and grew it and grew it to the point where we were, like what Pedro said, that these ideas are already out there. And there were other people on the East Coast doing very similar things. So we came under this whole umbrella of Guns to Gardens. And the Presbyterian Church then picks it up. And last year, they did over 30 Guns to Gardens buybacks. And that all comes back to Pedro and our inspiration, right? And that, to me, is where art can really be a catalyst for social change, when we can take an idea and we can make it grow. And then the story gets even better, because Robert from RFK Charter, he started working with the youth, so that Mike came out and we started forging tools with the youth about a month ago, so that we can sell them for more buybacks. But then Robert, who made from RFK, and also he has a nonprofit called Swept, is a big hero of mine, because he took Guns to Gardens and he took it in his own amazing direction, where he's using it now to not only have these youth forge, but those youth who have done something unfortunate with a firearm, and there are many in New Mexico, that instead of incarcerating them, right, like that's this school to prison pipeline over and over, instead of incarcerating them, teaching them to forge these guns into gardening tools, almost as a way, I would say, I don't want to speak for you, Robert, of restorative justice, and helping them refocus and get on the right track. And so again, that comes all back to Pedro and Mike from Raw Tools, and what all this work that people are doing on gun violence prevention and on these gun buybacks. And when we first started these back in, was it 2016, I guess? It was really hard. I mean, we knew that, New Mexico's a big gun culture here, right? And it was really pushing the comfort level of a lot of people, because we wanted to dismantle the guns on site. And the police were saying, "Heck no, you're not going to dismantle these beautiful firearms." And we're going, okay, this is going to be harder than we thought. And so, in fact, at our first buyback, we had law enforcement in tears as we were cutting up semi-automatic handguns. They were literally crying, literally, alligator tears coming down there. But since then, we actually now work very closely with police on this, because they're now looking at the guns we're getting in. To date, we've done 17 Guns to Gardens buybacks in New Mexico. We've taken over 1,700 firearms out of our community, and close to 40% of those have been semi-automatic handguns, semi-automatic rifles, and AR-15s. So when people say gun buybacks are a feel-good effort, well, they should probably come to one of our buybacks. The last buyback we had, we took in a fully automatic machine gun.
Wow.
We don't need these in our communities. But they were very hard to get going, and our buybacks wouldn't have started if it hadn't been for, sadly, our late mayor, Javier Gonzalez. He left us too soon. We all know that. But he worked so hard to make this happen because the police were saying, nope, it goes. We have a statute in New Mexico that said, this is so stupid. It says that, welcome to New Mexico. It says that if you are a law enforcement, you cannot dismantle a firearm without a court order of approval and get a historian in there to make sure it's not historical, because God forbid we cut up a historical gun. And so the police were saying, if you would do this at the police department, we would have to get a court of approval for destruction of every firearm. We're saying, no, you wouldn't, because we're the ones giving the gift card, and we're the ones that are dismantling it. You're just running them through NCIC to see if they're stolen or crime guns. And they just wouldn't buy that. And Javier Gonzalez, Mayor Gonzalez, he fought for it. We met over and over with this police chief. Yes, a big, I know he's up there. He's going, go, keep Guns to Gardens going. And so, but we knew if we could crack the nut in liberal Santa Fe, that maybe we could crack the nut in other areas, and it finally worked. And now we do them across New Mexico, and police ask us. It's not us begging anymore. They're literally calling us and saying, when can we do another buyback? We have too many guns in circulation. And again, this all comes back to Pedro and his idea, of turning these instruments of death into something that sustains life.
Miranda, I have a question for you. How does the gun buyback program get funded? Like, how does it work?
So we actually, things are getting better. So it used to be, that it was this little New Mexicans to Prevent Gun Violence as a nonprofit. We still pay for most of it from donations from our members. But then this last year, after Uvalde happened, there was a change. So a car dealership, a couple that has a car dealership in New Mexico, I think they have about 6, they got on board and they started helping fund it. And then the Attorney General, he's our new AG, Raul Torres, he actually got behind it and started using funding that they had to give to us. And now the past couple, we've only had to pay about half of them. Each gun buyback costs us between $25,000 and $30,000.
Wow.
So,
And does the is it just across the board? Like, if you bring in a handgun, you give $100 gift card, or is it like how do you determine the value of?
It took a little wiggle room. I mean, when we first did it, we weren't offering enough money, so we weren't getting that many guns in. And we're like, I think we have to raise the price a little bit. We do $100 for a long gun, pistol, or revolver, and then your semi-automatic handguns. That's something with a magazine. That gets $200, and they're all in gift cards of groceries, gas, no place that sells guns. And then for some your AR, also $200 for semi-automatic rifles, and then for AR-15 or assault-type weapons is $250.
I'm bringing that up because I just want you all to know that if you do buy a flower vase made by these amazing students, that those purchases will make a huge impact on the guns that are removed from the streets. So thank you, Miranda. Pedro, let's talk about sound. I want to change subjects because you started with Palas por Pistolas, and then you moved into making instruments out of weapons. And, sound is a powerful force that can inspire a wide range of emotions from rage to joy. And that transformation through the vibration of sound and frequency is so important. And I want to know, like, what inspired you to start making these instruments? Are you a musician? Do you know? Tell us about it.
Well, I think that the Palas por Pistolas happened at first in Culiacán, Sinaloa, and I had not finished like the planting that was like of the 1,500 trees when I was invited by Ciudad Juárez to do something along those same lines, but because we were still in the kind of not finishing the thing. Something that I had realized with the tree plantings was that it was an opportunity for members of a community to come together and talk about this, because it's and it may vary depending on the context. For instance, like maybe perhaps in one city would be survivors of suicide attempts, no, that would like kind of a sponsor a planting, or partner with a cultural institution to do a planting. You know, like a lot of deaths. You know, like maybe may like the gun deaths may take different forms in different contexts. So, but I saw that this opportunity of the object becoming a catalyst for the community to join in this event could be similar if if we made instruments, because also like like music is kind of the opposite of guns, because you know, like guns are the truth, the rule of fear and death, and music is the rule of trust and empathy, no, in the sense that everyone is connected through the experience of a concert, like we witnessed yesterday and we will today. And when we started then in like with this guns from Ciudad Juarez, almost like caveman, to scratch and blow and see what kind of instruments, you know, like so what kind of sounds could we extract from this metal. So, for instance, one of my favorite instrument is, for instance, like the flute, which is just like taking the barrel of a rifle of a shotgun, and then by just making the right holes, you can turn like a rifle into a flute. And actually, so you know, like there was like this first generation of instruments, and then the idea of having also an installation, which is, you know, like a present here in the exhibitions, in the galleries that you can see. The idea of having this installation of these are mechanized is also like the idea that there can be like kind of a score that is programmed and that can play into these instruments. So I think that is like, you know, like the most exciting part is that often when you have uh, an instrument, because I don't play, I don't know how to play an instrument. The but every musician will make something entirely different, and that's a very exciting thing, that you know, like that it's like an artwork that triggers other artworks, because it's like this uh, uh, very free interpretation of what will happen. No, I'm always keen on to see what will be.
Pedro, I was wondering, um, did you obtain all these weapons like through a gun buyback type program, or they were given to you? I was curious if you could talk a little bit about gun violence in Mexico and gun laws there. If you can talk to us about, is it easy to get a gun there, or is it, you know, how does it work?
Well, you know, like we don't have gun shops in Mexico, and we have very strict background checks. If you wanna buy a gun legally, uh, you have to pass an exam and like do a number of things.
So how are
But
people getting guns?
well, you know, like they just like come to the United States and, you know, like chop over them and then bring them down. So, so that's, you know, like a gun availability is also a gun availability in the United States is one of Mexico's biggest problems. You know, like uh, I sometimes use like the metaphor, like imagine that you live in an apartment and your neighbor upstairs built a pool and is leaking. So you know, like only that is leaking guns. You know, like there's like all these 90% of the guns that are in Mexico are kind of coming from the United States. So I think that, you know, like that's why I've been very interested in also seeing this as a shared problem, that and the fact that, for instance, like the project of amendment to the amendment, which is like this, like a rewrite of the Second Amendment, is just like a kind of a exercise to try to put out there the idea that like this Second Amendment needs to be rewritten. Like and it's not up to me to say how would it be rewritten, but like every people who participate in the workshop of rewriting the Second Amendment finds some potential improvement, not like that two lines, not so I think that I don't know if I am answering your question.
You are answering
Uh-huh.
our question. Yeah, it was really, I was very curious about gun violence in Mexico, and if that was really what kind of spearheaded this project to begin with, the Palas project. And I know that was a call for you. You made television commercials, correct? You like put a call out for people to give their guns back, and then the musical instrument, the disarm instruments, the government called you and gave you a bunch of guns that they had taken already, right?
Yeah, it was very interesting to do these TV spots because, for instance, in the TV spots were the first that we made to invite people to bring the gun to the city hall. We tried to create situations that would make clear that no questions would be asked. Like
So very similar to the model of the Colombian politician Anicus Mocas, right?
yes,
Like,
yes, exactly.
yeah,
For instance, like Antanas,
yeah.
like converted like confessionals in churches. He made a partnership with the church in Colombia, where would like you would like bring on their kind of confession, you could
It's
like
like bring a gun
bring your
and
gun.
give
Yeah.
it through the confession
Yes.
booth. So did you do something similar?
No, 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 because like what we did with the TV spots was that like we were trying to kind of making a little soap opera style, like a situation where someone would find out that his son had a arm in the closet, and there was like a or like a, that they, or one kid would like pick a gun and kill his little friend. So trying to frame this as a prevention for accidental deaths that are also a big problem, uh, 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 and not criminalize the gun owner. So it was very important to like, okay, we're just gonna bring it, and there was some incentives from Coppel, which is an electric appliance store, that gave gift cards that you could spend in these stores.
So you can like trade your gun and get a refrigerator or something?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, or a microwave or something.
That's very good. Miranda, how does the gun buyback work here? Is it similar in that it's just like no questions asked, people just bring their guns and turn them in, or
Yes.
you don't use a confession booth, I'm guessing?
No, but I actually really like that idea, and I'm tempted to do it. I'm very tempted to see if we can make that work. So when we do our gun buybacks, nobody gets out of their car, so they are 100% anonymous. The police take the gun out of the car, make sure it's not loaded. It's usually in the trunk, and then we're telling them, oh, it's a semi-automatic handgun. You can do Amazon, Walmart, Target, and they're picking those out. We also had them do an anonymous survey, thanks to Natalie, our board member and evaluator, and that has shown us that like close to 80% of the people turning in firearms are doing so for safety reasons. But even though it is 100% anonymous, people tell us their stories oftentimes, and what always amazes me about a gun buyback is the gratitude that people have that they know that gun is never going to end up in unsafe hands. I mean, people come with tears in their eyes, and sometimes we always have a social worker there as well because we've had mothers who the gun is still in the evidence box, and she lost her son, right? And so they want to make sure that that gun never ends up in unsafe hands. So what happens is they do their survey, get their gift card, they drive on. If it's a stolen, we run it through NCI. It's called NCIC here. The police run it through NCIC. If it's stolen, it goes back to its rightful owner. We've taken in maybe 15 stolen guns, and they had been stolen years ago. Probably they couldn't even find the owner. We've never had a crime gun because no criminal is stupid enough to use a gun in a violent crime and then turn it in $200 of Walmart cards. It's just not going to happen. And then they basically just go on their merry way. We were the last gun buy, or I guess the gun buyback we did in June in Albuquerque. It was pretty close after the Uvalde shooting, and an older gentleman drove up and he handed us his AR-15, and he said, "I don't want the gift cards. I'm retired military and I'm an NRA member, and after Uvalde, I'm done." And that was a hopeful moment, right? I know, wherever that man is. It was a hopeful moment because you realize we've had so many mass shootings, right? Sandy Hook, all those kids, over and over, Parkland. And it finally touched this person. So it gives us hope that maybe we'll get there.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty alarming. We've had more mass shootings this year than there have been days in this year. It's like a grim statistic. Miranda, the legislature's in session. Tell us what's happening.
Yes, it is. Well, I'll tell you the positive thing. The positive thing is that we have a governor who is trying to pass really good common sense gun violence prevention legislation. So since we've been around since 2013, we've passed a background check law. We passed a law to get guns out of the hands of domestic violence offenders. We actually thought we would have done that in one session. It took us 6 years in the state of New Mexico to get guns out of the hands of domestic violence offenders under protective orders. What's wrong with that picture, right? And we have police departments right now that refuse to uphold that law because they say it goes against the Second Amendment. So even though we do pass these laws, they're only as good as they're being used. So unfortunately, most of our law enforcement is good, but some of them we need to, be a little tougher with, I guess. And then we also passed an extremist protection order law, which gets guns out of unsafe hands. And we've hired a trainer now to train police, Sheila Lewis, who's amazing. So she's been doing the trainings for police. So this next legislative session, we really wanted to look at what could make the most difference. And we're a little concerned that what we think would make the most difference in terms of saving lives isn't one of the top priorities, but we'll work on that. So if you guys want to get behind and help us with that, let me know. What we're working on is Senate Bill 116, and that would simply raise the age from 19 to 21 to own semi-automatic firearms. I don't think a 19-year-old needs an AR-15. They don't have a frontal cortex, right?
Nobody needs an AR-15.
This is true. Well, yeah, then there's that. And then in addition to that, the other bill that we think actually would save a lot of lives is House Bill 100, and that's Representative Romero. And what that would do would be a 14-day hold on the sale of firearms. And yes, call that representative. She is being tough on this one. But what that would do is really the studies we've seen show that there's a huge reduction in suicide and homicide in states that have had that. And the RAND study just came out, and they actually said there's moderate evidence. You might go, well, that doesn't sound good. If RAND gives you moderate evidence, that's like getting an A- from a really tough teacher. So we know, right, that this is a piece of legislation that will work. The other legislation we're looking at is HB 9, that's child access prevention. We believe that's going to be greased through the governor's top priority. And then there's an assault weapons ban. That's House Bill 100. I think that's going to be tough in New Mexico, but, a girl can dream. So those are the specific pieces of legislation that we're working on as of now.
Thank you for doing all that work, Miranda. Pedro, how does it feel to meet someone like Miranda who read about your work in 2006 or whatever and then has just run with this? Like, what is that like?
Well, I was telling Miranda that as an artist, often one hopes to escape the white walls of the museum and like kind of encounter the world. And it's like almost like when it's like for instance in the academia, if someone has quoted your work, it's like an endorsement. No, that you. So I think that I had always had hope that the idea of Palas por Pistolas could be replicated, and it's like the kind of the most important motivation that I could dream of. Like to see that this is like being kind of expanded and improved, and for me it's like like I'm over the moon.
Yeah, over the moon.
it's like a kind of a I'm your fan.
Yeah, mutual fans up here. Miranda, what can what kind of support do you need? Like, if people want to get involved, how can they support New Mexicans to prevent gun violence? Like, what can, if somebody that isn't an activist and just wants to be involved and is really concerned about this, like,
They,
what would you recommend?
well, I'd recommend you go to our website, but it's down.
But
So,
it is in your pamphlet, so
yeah.
keep trying.
Keep it. We're hoping 48 hours. Fat Cow's going to come through. So right now our website's down, but yeah, if you want to go to www. Oh, it's in there. And message us, and we'll go out for coffee and figure out what would be a good fit for you, in terms of getting involved. We're a fun group. We do a lot of crazy fun things.
Well, before we close, you two, thank you both for being here. And if you have questions for each other, I mean, it's just like a miracle you all came together and you're like, I don't know. You answered the phone. I did, but that was a miracle that I answered the phone. Um, 'cause- not because I don't like to talk on the phone, just because I don't have time. But I don't want to bogart with all of my questions. I'm just curious if y'all have anything that you want to add together.
Well, there's something that I was curious that you were saying about this search of 3D printed guns. That suddenly, like, kind of like it's becoming a big problem. I don't know if you can tell a little bit about this.
Are those called ghost guns?
Yeah, so there's two different types. So I forgot there's another piece of legislation now that you mentioned that. There's also House Bill 72, and that's to take. It's called an auto sear, or a firearm converter. It's the size of a thimble, and it turns a 9mm Glock into a fully automatic machine gun. In 10 seconds, you can go through a 100-round drum. Yeah, and we had legislators last night saying that that was violating their Second Amendment rights if we were to get those off the street. So when we did our last buyback, we actually got 12 of those auto sears that had been 3D printed. We also got a printed AR-15 and 7 semi-automatic handguns, which makes us think that we're about to see a wave of these coming into circulation. What's disconcerting about them is that you basically, once you print them out, all you need is a nail from a hardware store to complete it. So there's that problem. And then they're not that, they're kind of expensive to print, to be honest, once you buy the printer. But then there's also the kits. So the kits are something we're also worried about. You can buy a kit for about $200, and if you know how to use a screwdriver, you can put the gun together. It doesn't have what's called a lower receiver on the bottom of it, that you do need a background check for, but you can build a lot of that gun without that piece. So I do think that ghost guns I think they're here to stay. I think the genie's out of the box, and I have no idea how you fix it, because it was an anarchist that put the code online, so it's very easy to find. All you have to do is have the money to buy the printer, and you can print out massive amounts of these firearms that will end up, a lot of them, in Mexico.
I know this is a really heavy topic, and we haven't had a lot of time, but we can take a couple of questions if anybody has a question that they'd like to ask. And I think one of my colleagues will bring a microphone, or I can do that. What should I do? There's this lady up front. I don't recognize her.
My question is, who chose the prices and why for the buybacks?
That's a good question. So we had to kind of, the first buyback we did, like I said, we went way too low. And so we kind of had to find that sweet spot. You don't want to offer too much, because you don't want people buying firearms and then bringing them. So you're just kind of, it's not going to help you. So you have to find kind of that sweet spot of what will people bring them in for, but not too much. But what's interesting about it is what we're seeing is, like, our last gun buyback, we ran out of gift cards. We had 26,000 gift cards. We ran out in 2 hours, but we have to stay for the whole 4 hours. People kept bringing their guns. We're like, we're sorry, we're out of gift cards. They're like, we don't care. We just want to get rid of our guns. So So there is that, and I know that the Presbyterian churches, they're across the country, they are offering, and sometimes they're not even offering money; they're just saying bring them in. So there's that too. But we found that what we're doing right now, is what's getting in the most guns. We're considering raising it to 300 for assault weapons.
I actually have a question for Pedro. What was your initial thought on us starting to do this project for you?
Well, first of all, I was very happy and grateful that you were ready to jump into the thing, because it was like very short notice, no? And I am very happy that you know, like that you trusted the process of doing this. But more than that, like, I was surprised by the outcome. Like, I think that the use of of like, it was like very surprising to see the designs, and you know, like, to find like forms that I would not have imagined, no? And that that each one is different. Uh, so so I saw pictures of, it was like 2 weeks ago that this only 2 weeks ago that this was happening. And and I and 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 you have to correct me if I'm wrong, but you know, like, if all these bases manage to sell, we may be taking about 600 guns out of the streets, no? So
Curious about the conversations that you mentioned, and potentially the theatrical element that was mentioned in the description. I particularly, my ears perked up when you said around suicide, or around people that were bringing in guns related to that, and I wondered if you could paint the picture a little bit more.
it's, you know, like, it's very interesting that statistically, in the northern hemisphere in the planet, like, gun deaths are mostly suicides. In the southern hemisphere are homicides, uh, and worse. But you know, like, there's you know, like, like, suicide is a big issue around the world. Countries that are safe or relatively, you know, like, like, I don't know, like, Sweden or Switzerland, etc., that have like super high suicide rates, no? And if you have like a gun at home, uh, the the likelihood of that, like, suicides when there's like a gun around, are much more probable, no? So I don't know if you know, like, you were trying to you were mentioning something about theater. I mean, like, what the perhaps like the what we were doing with this kind of workshop of amendment to the amendment is what is called legislative theater. And legislative theater is a form of workshop um, that was invented by Augusto Boal, a Brazilian theater director that run for, you know, like, he was like in Congress in Brazil, and he started using theater to stage situations that were seemingly untractable, and at a moment he would stop the play and ask people from the audience, how would you finish this play? And you know, like, and then different ends to the story are uh, staged through improvisation. And it's a very good method of conflict resolution, because you explore a lot of potential outcomes for one situation. So it's not prescriptive in the sense that this is like the one solution, but there's like a kind of a rainbow or of potential solutions. And I think that this, like, in the case of amendment to the amendment, which maybe we should get to do one of those, because it's like, you know, like, often when you are trying to have a discussion about the social problem, you know, like you have like a large group, and not everybody has a chance to speak out. So in the way that that workshop works is that you have like you break down the participants into small groups, and everyone is given the task of rewriting the Second Amendment in 20 minutes. So they discuss and they just have to put down their version, and then you pass around the microphone, and one representative for every group says what is the kind of the changes that they suggest, and some maybe like as simple as a comma, another maybe like a full rewrite. Some people would, you know, it's not in the sense that you have not necessarily to kind of like make a more strict the law. You know, like some people like may wanna like a kind of a bigger expansion of their gun rights or something. But I think that just the fact of eroding the idea of the amendment as something unmutable and changeable is like important, no? Like the thing that this is needs something that needs to be that needs to change.
I love the idea. I think we should do that. So far we have 3 ideas, and Pedro doesn't know about my third one. So we have the confessional with the gun, we have rewriting the Second Amendment, and then you coming back and working with our youth on musical instruments.
Let's do it.
Thank you, Miranda, for the information, but I'm going to ask another question of Pedro. Uh, Mexico has a big narco traficante subculture. Do they feel threatened by your work?
Well, you know, like I don't think that have never felt so, but you know, like but because uh, I mean, the thing is that I often, when you know, like working with guns, perhaps has been associated with my local context, but in reality, like I think this is like a global phenomena, and that I think that there's like a kind of a visible violence, which is the violence of when the gun is used, and there's another invisible violence that is when the gun is made. And nobody talks about that, you know, like nobody puts any scrutiny on the weapon factories and gun shows and all that. So you know, like I think that there's a kind of for instance, like there's another piece in the show that are these music boxes that are called Return to Sender, that I was trying to perhaps like kind of address this issue that, so for instance, you have like these clock parts that like so it's a glockenspiel, not like a kind of music box that you turn the crank and it would play a piece by Mozart, no, because Glock is an Austrian brand. And then another one is made with Beretta rifles, so it's Italian, and it plays like a piece by Vivaldi, a fragment of the Four Seasons, and it's, you know, like it's curious. For instance, Beretta is a company that is 500 years old. How many companies in the world are that old? So it tells you about like the kind of resilience of these weapon companies that have been involved in this business for a very long time. And I think that that's a kind of that we need to do a stigmatization of that part of the problem. Because, you know, like I think that through movies or through this kind of pop culture, it's like the same that happens with drugs, you know, like one of the biggest epidemics in this country is, for instance, like Oxycontin, which are kind of a white-collar drug dealers, you know, like it's the problem of addiction that has been created. So, you know, like I think that there's always like a kind of racial double standard where there's kind of a stigma that maybe associate guns with a certain demographic. But then, for instance, like the guns that are killing people, you know, like maybe factored in Finland or in Austria or in Belgium, and you know, like places that you don't associate with violence. But these are factories that only export violence and suffering around the world. So I think that, you know, like that I honestly think that the world would be only a better place if gun production would to stop altogether. You know, like with like a, yeah.